you, it will be something that you know a lot about, and you can go to sleep for about 10 minutes or so. We'll put you in a cookie coma and you'll be set. And for then, what we want to do is give each of our field staff who are here an opportunity to just talk for 5 minutes, give you an idea of what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they think they might be able to help you, and then we'll break up and sit around the tables and give you a chance to talk one-on-one. Is the goal of this. The main thing that we want to do is give you an idea of the breadth of the experience that we have here, and hope that we can encourage good partnerships between the outreach side of what we do and the research we run. So what I'm going to do is go through a little bit of why this is important to us and to the RFP process, and give you a little bit about a background about our program and also about the RFP itself. So, Washington Sea Grant, what we are a 40-year-old NOAA University partnership that is located in the College of the Environment at the University of Washington. So we are the program for the state of Washington. We are a national network, part of a national network of 33 Sea Grant colleges, and they're located virtually every coastal and Great Lakes state has a Sea Grant program. California and Massachusetts actually have 2, but the rest of the program, there's 1 per state. The idea of it initially was supposed to be a salty analog to the land-grant colleges, and it has never grown to the size of the land-grant colleges. It also has a much stronger external research program than probably a lot of the land-grant colleges. So what we do is we have federal grant support, and then we have funds that are funds that we get from the federal government, from NOAA, is leveraged on a 2-to-1 basis with state and university funds. So for every $2 that we can provide to you for doing your research project, you have to come up with $1 in match. Some of the programs in other states have stronger support from their legislatures, and they are able to provide the matching funding. That's not the case in Washington, so we have to ask you to come up with your own match. We have 31 staff that manage our research program and our education activities. Then we also offer marine advisory services. That's most of the people that you'll talk to today. Some of our educators are also here, and our communications staff. We operate a full communications staff. And the last thing is actually just an idea from a budget standpoint. About half of the federal grant that we get goes into competitive research programs. And most of those projects, we do a few small program development grants. Most of those grants are selected through the competitive process that we started in January. So what makes us different from other competitive research programs is this idea. I get a lot of questions about, are you only interested in applied research? Do you support basic research? I think the main thing for us is that the research has to have a use. When you go in and it's not that it's not great research, it can also be terrific basic research. It's just that there is an immediate application for it. So in a way, I guess it is applied research. What we do, one thing, because we're not in a land-grant institution, many of the Sea Grant programs around the country are at land-grant institutions, and they build on that land-grant framework that exists at their institution. We are not, so what we do instead, because we're a smaller, a little bit more insular program, is we rely on a huge number of partnerships. And given the number of state organizations in the state of, or marine organizations in the state of Washington, it's not hard to find partners. So there are state and federal agencies, tribal, of course the different academic institutions, the industry, and also public. So the idea of it then, where we're shooting for throughout our program, is to develop useful information and decision-making tools for people in the state and across the country. So this request for proposal, we have an investment of about $2 million this year. It is a little bit lower than we normally have, so it's about $1 million a year. And we think that that can probably be used to support 8 to 11 new projects, depending on the size of the projects. The reason why this is lower, We had some commitments for funding for this year and into next year. We have worked out a great partnership with the Puget Sound Partnership that we hoped would be a continuing effort, and the funding just has not been there for them. So we ended up having to pick up the cost of the second year of all those programs that we were doing in partnership with them. So it's reduced the funding that we have available. The other thing that we're doing this year is, this is the first year we're going to have a cap on the annual budget. What happened in the last go-round, we didn't, and people came in like really terrific projects, but with very large budgets. Basically, if you get a bigger budget, you can do more science. And then what happened is we had to work with them to cut back the size of the budget, and it was a really, really frustrating exercise for us and for them, because it's really hard to maintain the scope of your research if we're trying to cut out 10 or 20% of the funding that we're giving you. So we put a cap on this year. We talked to people. This is about the average size of our grants. If there's a really excellent reason, we can go over that, but that would have to be something that you talk to us about before we do it. Projects have to be aligned with our strategic plan, and they have to meet the project evaluation criteria. And I'll talk really briefly about both of those in a second. And then today, the primary thing that we want to talk to you about is the engagement plans. So it's a part that we started about 6 years ago on the engagement plans. I think the first year we did it, the standard engagement plan is, I'm going to go to a professional organization and do a presentation, and I'm going to do a website. And it's like, okay, that's fine, but it's not really great. So what has happened since then, and I think it's a trend that you've seen in most funding agencies in the federal government, there's been a push for broader impacts, or to deal with broader impacts, or in our case, the engagement plans, is that people have really begun to come up with innovative ideas, very exciting ideas. They tend to be more expensive then, so one way that we thought of to try to deal with that is, what we will do is, if our field staff or any of our staff are working with you on a project, the time that they spend on the project will come out of the other side of our budget. So the idea was is you could build stronger engagement plans, and it would actually cost less relative to the overall cost of the research program. So that's the theory, and today we're going to start testing it. If you have other partners that you want to work with, there's absolutely no requirement nor any restriction on those partners. A lot of people have really great ties in educational programs, or they have industry partners that they work with. That's all fine. We don't want to change any of that. We just want to provide you with a new opportunity. There are 2 RFP categories this year. There's the traditional research one that most of you have been involved in, and then one thing that we're really excited about is to do at least a pilot program on maritime workforce. So the Maritime Workforce Pilot Program is coming out of, there has been an initiative that Governor Inslee started that is basically to look at the maritime industries and begin to develop better cross-industry policies. One piece of that was a partnership that was formed between education and training programs and the industry itself. This came out of actually an aviation industry problem. Boeing was discovering that they didn't have the welders they need, they didn't have the people who were in the trades that they needed to be able to work on their planes and to meet other needs. So the maritime industry came in when those programs started being built and said, we need the same thing. It's been really interesting for me. I don't think I heard anything about this until last summer, and almost any of the constituent groups we've talked to can identify similar needs. So it may not be for welders, but it may be for people that have expertise in the fishing industry or shellfish or something like that. So what we thought, one of the other things questions that you always come up with on competitive research is whether this is the right format for you to use for that. And I think in the conversations with, I guess it was in Port Townsend, we were there, and they were talking, they're trying to start a maritime high school. And one of the things that they talked about is the total budget for it was about $750K. So what we thought is, okay, if we can give you a a direct federal grant of $220,000 for the 2 years, plus the match, we actually can make a difference and help you achieve your goals. So that's where this came from. There was a roundtable initiative that has been going on now for over a year, and it's focusing on 3 things. One is pathways to the maritime workforce, and this is basically the issue that students, returning vets, people like that don't know how to get good maritime jobs. There's also there are curriculum needs and teacher training needs, and then last time is just connecting the industry with training providers. So this is a new thing we're doing this year. Hopefully it'll work. Because we're fairly low in our total budget, we won't spend more than 1 project's worth on it, but unless we don't get any good research projects, which I find hard to believe. And then research, so these are the stats from the last time we did this. We had 79 pre-proposals that requested about $16 million. There were, what we do is we go through a process. We have a pre-proposal panel that will meet. The pre-proposals are due at the end of February. The pre-proposal panel will meet in March, near the end of March. What they'll do is they are made up of inside Washington people mostly, a lot of agency people, some of our staff that have really good technical expertise, and the part of the process that we're doing for the pre-proposals is trying to identify what is a good fit with our program. How can we use the research proposals that we have to meet the strategic plan that we developed about 3 years ago? So that, they'll come up, what we try to do in that is we encourage people to submit full proposals. As long as you submit a preliminary proposal, you can submit a full proposal. So that's truth up front, we don't encourage it. But what we try to do is estimate, so we aren't encouraging more than about twice the number of people that we actually have money for. So if people volunteer, it kind of throws things off, but that's the way we do it. So we ended up with 42 full proposals, and actually because of the additional funding we had, we were able to do 18 new projects. And the commitment for that was $3 million over 3 years. Hence some of our shortfalls this year. Right now, in addition to those 18 projects, we have about 20 ongoing projects that we're supporting. They're either carryovers from the RFP before that, or some of them are program development projects. And there are more than 80 investigators, graduate students, and undergraduates involved. And they're all over the place, everywhere from private institutions. Probably the furthest away is we have one under Cornell. Indian Nation has one, but a lot of UW. Traditionally, the University of Washington has been the dominant organization. And then in addition to that, the other thing that we have is we have aquaculture research. That's done at the national level. There's usually about $4 million available. They're bigger grants, so part of just getting you alert to that so that when the call comes out, we're trying to convince them that they need to broaden it so that it can deal with some broader issues than just how to grow one specific species. But that's another part of the research program. So the schedule this year I've talked about, so the request came out in mid-February. This is today, is February 11th, so then February 26th, the preliminary proposals are due. April 1, April Fool's Day, that seems like the perfect time to give full notifications. Then May 21st, the full proposals are due. Then in the period from June to August, we'll do a full-blown NSF-style type peer review. So one of the things you need to do when you submit your pre-proposal, please give us good reviewers. We won't use them on your project necessarily, but we won't use them until the full proposal level, but it really, really helps. Because the big problem is 32 other Sea Grant programs are doing this all at the same time. And if you get asked to review, please do it, so we can get all of our proposals reviewed. So we do 3 to 5 reviews on each one, some of them, and then once those are all finished, we send the reviews back to you as PIs, and you get to respond to them. And it's actually a really useful part of the process. that we found. I've learned over the last 10 years that peer reviews sometimes vary in their quality and also sometimes even in their accuracy. We had one, my favorite one was, we sent the proposal to someone who was on the direct opposite theoretical side as the person who was writing the proposal, and we got back a review that was longer than the proposal. So it's really an interesting process. Can I use you as an example again, Jeff?
Yes.
So Jeff is one of my favorites because he had a proposal for doing a prototype for the seawall down in Seattle, and one of the reviewers pointed out some weaknesses in their design of their experiment, and it was actually the coolest, I think my favorite response I ever got, because they went back, they looked at it, agreed with the reviewer, and said how they would adjust their design if they were funded, and it was really impressive use of that review process, probably one of the best uses of a review that I've ever seen. So that all happens, then we ship all of that out to our outside, our technical panel. Those are all outside people. They have a really, really broad spectrum of expertise, so they won't all necessarily be an expert on your subject matter. We try to make sure that's covered in the peer reviews. Then we do an annual advisory panel review. They will take all of your proposals and they kind of put them into bins. The one bin is that, don't do it. And then the other one is if you only have $3.50 spent on this proposal. So there are those two groups, and then there are usually one or two groups in the middle. And that's where a lot of the discussion occurs afterwards, where they are good proposals, they're fully fundable, but we just don't have enough money. And so then it becomes a priority setting process. So then what we do is we talk to our advisory panel and get some of their ideas on the priorities. We then take all the information we've got and we do the notification in late September. So that's the process, and then the projects start in February 2016. One thing we're struggling with this year that I'll just raise on your spectrum so you can think about is this issue of IACUC protocols and human subjects protocols has become an increasingly time-consuming part of the process. So what we think we're going to do is, once we decide, and IACUC is animal care and then human subjects is for any of the social scientists, what we think we're going to do is as soon as we ship it off to NOAA, you won't have your proposal, you won't have your protocols at that point, but we'll work over that intervening time between late September and early February to get you set to go. So the two documents you should have seen, we're trying to do everything electronically, so we have printed copies of the RFP. It's on our website if you don't have it. And then the strategic plan is the other big document for us. And the strategic plan, we have 4 critical program areas that you want to hook up with. One is healthy coastal ecosystems. This tends to be a lot of the proposals we get. It's conserving habitats and dealing, this is where ocean acidification would go, and aquatic invasive species and a lot of those issues. Then sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. And this is another big area, but most of it is funded by the National Aquaculture Competition. Resilient communities and economies. This is where all the hazards material is going. There's a huge emphasis at NOAA right now and throughout the federal government on hazard resilience. So one of the things we're hoping is that we'll actually get what they've done in the past is they've given us money back. Whenever, if we supported a social science proposal in the last go round, we got an additional increment from the national contest for that proposal. So we're hoping that might happen with natural hazards. They're also talking about possibly doing that on water quality too, and water resources. So those are 2 things to keep in mind. And then ocean literacy and workforce capacity. And that one is we do primarily through our educational programs, so we don't have as many research proposals. So one of the things to think about, we tend to get a lot of proposals in the healthy coastal ecosystems and sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. If you pick an area that maybe is something that we need to do in our strategic plan, which is why we want you to take a look at it and can find a way to fill that gap, it becomes very helpful. Our staff time is spent primarily in the fisheries, resilient communities and economies, and then the ocean literacy and workforce capacity. So one of the other things we're trying to do is balance out and overall get a balanced program in these 4 areas. Last thing, and I'm taking up too much time, the project evaluation criteria. These criteria, they're the same for both at the pre-proposal and the full proposal level, but they shift in their emphasis. So at the pre-proposal level, the program project contribution is super important because that's really where we're making the decision on how we construct our overall program. So it's the largest criteria we have. The next one is the technical and scientific merit. That is very hard to judge at the pre-proposal level because you only have 4 pages. So that one, what we'll do is, that one is less important than the pre-proposal. It becomes the really key ingredient at the full proposal level. So the project contribution is still important, but it's really much more focused on the technical and scientific merit. And then the engagement plan, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is actually, is it the same? The last 3 are all the same level for both, which is really a critical component and one way that you can make yourself much more competitive. Because what you find is people tend to be figure out the top 2 pretty well. The engagement plan often is the difference between whether you get funded or not. And then the qualification, that's usually the least important thing because there are lots of well-qualified people and it's not usually a problem. And then the last thing is the project cost. And that's mostly if it's realistic and it fits. This is where some of the things come in. We are no longer encouraging people to over-cost share because it evidently creates havoc in the university with it screws around with their indirect cost agreement. So what we're doing is encouraging you to be on it. Just find the cost share and that's great. The other issue that you have with it is that you can do things like bring in state agencies, bring in federal agencies that can't be used as much, but, well, the state agencies can, but the federal agencies can't. And so what you can do is you can use them as leverage for your project and make sure that you could do a bigger project using these extra people. Reviewers are very suspicious if you promise to cure cancer and you've only requested a budget of $10. So what you have to, what it does is it lets you explain exactly how this builds on other things you're doing and things like that. So those are important to think about there. What we do, about half of our budget is in the research. What we're going to talk about today is that olive quarter, which is the outreach, and then also we have a few people that will also be able to talk about communications and education. This I'm going to shortcut just because we have the people on the line to go ahead and do it, and it's much better if they explain what they do. This is advisory services, then communications, and education. And I think that this is our information. It's on the back of the RFP that you can get it. And Ian's he's on
You should just be able to talk. Are you going to speak too? No.
yeah. I don't know how you can see him and you can see his slides at the same time. Thank you. And if you have questions, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I guess so, if that'll work best.
We have his slides. He can just talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I included a photo so they don't have to see me.
Good move.
All right. So am I ready? Should I dive in?
Yeah. So Marcus.
Okay.
Go to the next slide.
So thank you. My name is Ian Miller, and I am called the Coastal Hazards Specialist with Washington Sea Grant. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, and I won't be able to participate in the speed dating component of this meeting. I'm in California working with colleagues on a project that I will describe a little bit later. But I'm just going to use my time to describe a little about me and a couple of different example projects and sorts of things that I work on, and then some ideas about what I could possibly do working with you. And so I have a BS from Huxley College in marine ecology, and then my PhD is in coastal oceanography and coastal geomorphology, really, from UC Santa Cruz. I work with Gary Griggs, for those of you who know him, was my advisor for my PhD program. And then currently, as I said, I'm coastal hazards specialist for Washington Sea Grant, based in Port Angeles, Washington, so on the Olympic Peninsula. And I also sort of act as the Sea Grant representative on the Olympic Peninsula. And then I also teach oceanography at Peninsula College, which is a community college on the Olympic Peninsula. I've sort of listed my research and resilience kind of interests on that slide. You can just check those out. But essentially, I try to work in all facets related to natural coastal hazards, and then really try to relate them to communities and figure out ways, strategies, approaches, activities, outreach activities that I can use to encourage and help communities to build approaches to these hazards to reduce their risk or improve their ability to bounce back after an event, something along those lines. The photograph up on the corner is me. I'm the handsome young guy in the purple shirt. No, I'm totally joking. I'm the guy in the black coat, and over at the lower left is a blog that I maintain. So if you're interested in sort of seeing the things that I work on, my blog is a good place to go to sort of see the breadth of activities that I might be involved in. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So a few current example projects that I just chose to highlight here. Let's start in the upper right. That's a climate change assessment I'm engaged with in Clallam and Jefferson County that's designed to be comprehensive, but my role is primarily to look at sea level rise and coastal flooding. So this photograph is from a public workshop that we held in Port Angeles, using some preliminary estimates of sea level rise for communities on the Olympic Peninsula. Lower right is related work. This is applied research into sea level rise and variability in rates of sea level rise in Washington State due to our very complex patterns of vertical land movement that we have here. And then continuing to the lower left, one of the projects that I've gotten up and running in the past year or so is to develop a shoreline monitoring program focused on the Olympic Peninsula to try to provide us with the information that we would need in the long term in order to manage shorelines under things like a sea level rise or storm impacts, that kind of thing. And then finally, in the upper left is a publication that's in press right now that I'm a partner on, focusing on one aspect of the research that I'm involved with on the Elwha River Delta, which is primarily focused on coastal response to the dam removal, both physical and biological. So a couple of example projects gives you the sense of the sort of activities that I might engage in or the things I might do. And then let's go to the final slide. Thank you, Marcus. So finally, what can I do for your project? Well, I think that there's really sort of a few different ways that I could potentially partner with you. You know, if you're working outside of one of kind of my core discipline areas, but if you're interested in engaging with the Olympic Peninsula in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a community on the Olympic Peninsula or local managers, that's where I think I could really help you. I can be a conduit to identifying coastal communities that you might identify as a pilot if your research in some way sort of rely on having a pilot community. Similarly, I can act as a contact for local managers that you might want to partner with to utilize your research in some way, shape, or form and demonstrate its applicability. And then I can also sort of help you just think through your outreach and engagement plan. One of the things I didn't mention is I have a background in education. I have done just a lot of sort of public outreach work, and so I might be able to sort of help you think about the the outreach and engagement plan, regardless of sort of what discipline you're working in. And then finally, if you're working in an area that's related to one of my disciplines, you know, we could consider the idea of me providing technical support for your research objectives, and I sort of list down there a variety of things that I feel like I have enough technical expertise in to be able to contribute to you know, your research project. And then of course we go to consider the idea of, you know, developing a full partnership in which we're working together to develop research elements in the entire project. So just a few ideas. Again, I'm not going to be there to meet you in person, so I've put my office phone and my email address at the bottom of that screen, and would love to talk over the phone or start an email conversation, or we could set up an in-person meeting in Seattle at some later date, a week or two down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I am here. Yeah, people don't know what it is there. It's a surprise.
My name is Miley Sullivan, and I'm one of the education specialists for Washington Sea Grant. So I'm going to actually cover a little bit about what I do, K-12 education, and then my colleague, Nancy Reichley, who is not here today, focuses a lot more on the undergraduate and graduate fellowships. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And Penny, feel free to chime in on those, or what I'm talking about. So we do a lot of, I think all of Sea Grant does a lot of work with the public and with kids. I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about what I work on, but it's not, our K-12 education is not limited to just what I do, so I just want to give that disclaimer. One of the programs that I run is NOAA Science Camp. We partner with NOAA, the NOAA facilities here in Washington, in Seattle, so the Mountain Lake facility and also Sandpoint, and we offer science camps for middle schoolers and also a junior leadership program for the high school students. And so that's a really neat opportunity to sort of get engaged with that age group during the summertime. We work a ton with the scientists out at NOAA, but we're certainly not limited to just working with them. So if you have interest or you already have ties to NOAA research, certainly we are always looking for ways to get more people involved in NOAA Science Camp. The program runs 2 weeks in July, and so this summer it will, if we get the federal funding that we need, it will run starting on July 6th and run those 2 weeks. And typically every summer it's about those 2 weeks. I also run Orca Bowl, so I'm thick in the middle of Orca Bowl right now. The competition is on February 28th, and how many of you guys are going to Orca Bowl? Anybody? Have some volunteers in your end. So that's a high school ocean knowledge bowl competition, and so high school teams from around the state train all fall, and then they come and compete in sort of a quiz bowl, style competition for 1 day at the University of Washington. This is going to be our 18th year, so UW has been involved for a really long time, and Sea Grant has been involved in the past 7 or 8 years, sort of a facilitator of the event. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio of volunteers to high school students, so we're always looking for ways to engage scientists in that competition in some way, shape, or form, either as a volunteer or in sort of enrichment activities. So that might be a possibility for some of your projects. And then lastly, we have the Washington on Water database. And this is, I think, a really useful tool if you're looking for, you have a project that you're like, oh, I need to know what different programs are out there that have, boat capabilities, on the water capabilities that maybe I could take some of my research equipment on and work with students with. And so you might search that in the database. So we partner with, educators, scientists, industry, government, nonprofits, and try and get their information on that website in that database. 2 minutes. So those are K through 12. Graduate fellowships and undergraduate fellowships, we offer support and guidance in some different fellowships that we have in Washington. One of them is the Knaus Marine Policy Fellowship. Another one is the Mark Hirschman Marine Policy Fellowship. And we also work with the NIMS Fellows. These are all sort of, you can talk to us more about that at the table. I won't go into the details. And then we also help facilitate undergraduate interns through the program on the environment, and then also through the CERP program, which is, what does that stand for?
Summer Undergraduate Research Program.
Thank you. And that's through space grants. So if you guys are working with anybody who might be interested in some of this, we can help facilitate that. I think there are ways that it might be relevant to your projects, but maybe a little bit more creatively. So what can we do for your project? As I mentioned, connect you to local high school teachers who have students interested in marine science. All those folks that we have
Feeding and Workable are great, you know, if you want to present in a classroom or you have a research tool that you want to try out, or that you want kids to try out, I can connect you with these folks. Also, NOAA Science Camp, or Junior Leadership Program, is sort of a newer program, so we're always looking for student-led research projects, and so that's a great place to sort of bring some of the stuff that you're doing and integrate it into the camp program. And then just also, like Ian said, being a conduit to the regional education entities. We work a lot with them, and so we can point you in the right direction if there are programs that would be appropriate to partner with. And then also potentially help your graduate student through our CERP research programs or through the NIMS fellowship, so helping with support. And lastly, also same thing with undergraduates. So if you guys have any questions on any of that, please feel free to contact us at, I can be reached at Miley Sull at UW, and I have cards in the back, but also at Workable at UW, NOAA Science Camp at UW. There's lots of ways you can get a hold of us, and Nancy as well. So.
This is me, Meg Jetsy, and I'm one of 3 people at Washington Sea Grant who serves as a liaison to local NOAA entity. My particular connection is with NOAA Pacific Marine Environmental Lab, and more specifically within that large institution, I tend to focus on the carbon dioxide program and the chemical oceanographers up there, but because of my specialty in ocean acidification, but I want to say at the outset that if any of you are developing proposals with anyone at NOAA or at NOAA PMEL, please consider me as a resource or potential partner in your project, because I love it when I'm able to work for both of the entities that support me. So ocean acidification, I didn't include this information on my slide, but I joined Sea Grant as a temporary staff member in 2012 when I was working to help coordinate Governor Gregoire's Blue Ribbon Panel on ocean acidification, and then I joined Sea Grant as a permanent staff member in 2013 as their first ocean acidification specialist. It was before 2012, 2011, they didn't have anybody on the staff to do that, but now they do, and I hope I can be that person for you. So, am I advancing my slides since I'm actually physically here? Okay. Here are some examples of some of the outreach type activities that I have supported or been involved with in the last year or so at Sea Grant. I worked with scientists at NOAA PMEL and their international colleagues, and also scientists at the UW, to develop a 2-pager consensus document, which we felt comfortable calling a fact sheet on ocean acidification. We first did the one that was called 20 Facts, and then this past year have followed up with a Pacific Northwest focused fact sheet. And the purpose of these fact sheets was not so much as for the general public, and I have produced versions of that as well, but this was a communication guide written by scientists for their colleagues in the scientific community for when they were talking about this issue to the media, to policymakers, and to the public. And the idea was that they would basically have agreed upon language to avoid as much as possible the appearance of confusion on this issue, when in fact there's quite a bit of scientific certainty. But now I consider myself pretty good at making fact sheets, and that is something that I can offer people if that is part of your outreach plan. The second example is the SOURCE webinar. The OA in that stands for ocean acidification, and if you spell it all out, it's sharing ocean acidification resources for communicators and educators. And this was initiated by the NOAA Ocean Acidification Program and the Marine Sanctuary Program, and answering a need among this community. of informal and formal educators for an easy one-stop shopping. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused between projects. Monthly webinars approximately on how to communicate, stay current, find resources on this topic. And those are, I can point you to those as an example of something I can help you produce or bring you into an existing program for your research. Ocean acidification curriculum collection is a similar vein, and the lead on this project is Paul Williams, who's sitting in the back. He is tribal shellfish biologist for Suquamish tribe and an unstoppable educator, and he noticed that there were so many resources already available for free, online, in print, all over the place. They weren't collected and evaluated and curated in a good way in many places. So he set out and enlisted my help with developing, and this is a work in progress, this really nice searchable online site for educational resources and other materials that you can use on this topic. And then just threw this in, this is kind of old. I actually made these buttons back in 2011 when I was trying to get, forge my path as an ocean acidification person, and they're all over the world now. I made them for my first ocean acidification event, which was in the fall of 2011, and Sea Grant participated in that as a sponsor. All right, next slide, me. Okay. I didn't provide the background information on me. I'm a local person. I grew up here in Seattle, Vashon Island. I did my undergraduate at Cornell University in genetics, and then came here to the UW for a PhD in microbiology and immunology, which Clem Furlong remembers me from my puppy days, and then veered off course to where I really belong, which is in the saltwater environment. So that's my background. Those are some of the things I can provide assistance with. My expertise is ocean acidification and climate change as it relates, harmful algal blooms, and if I can remember it, historical microbiome and molecular biology techniques. I think they're all out of date. So these are the things I would like to offer you, and please come to talk with me in the networking session. All kinds of outreach materials for all kinds of audiences, print, mostly print, I guess, but I can help you write curricula a little bit. I'm not an education or curricular specialist, but I've picked up a lot in my last year working on this. I can help you with delivery, can help you facilitate workshops or presentations that you may want to conduct. I do consider myself a science interpreter. I like to take technical information, which I do understand, and think about the various ways that the public might receive it, and try and really refine communication materials in that way. And then finally, I like the word conduit people have been using. I can be your conduit to a diverse community, including artists, and I encourage you to think about ways that art might play a role in your outreach program. All right, thank you.
It's always a surprise nobody actually knows what order we're in. So there you go. My name is Kate Lytle. I'm the Assistant Director for Programs at Washington Sea Grant, although that is a relatively recent title. Some of you may know me as the Citizen Science Specialist, and so that's mostly what I'm going to talk to you about today. So my background is in biology. I have an undergraduate degree in biology and then a master's degree from the School of Marine Affairs. And I joined Sea Grant back in 2009 as the first Citizen Science Specialist. See, Meg, she was the first ocean acidification specialist. And they still, even though I have this new title and new responsibilities, they still let me do citizen science things on occasion. So that is what I will tell you a bit about. And I thought I would just start by doing a little bit of an example about projects and things that I've done in the past. One of the first things that I did when I started was pull people together to make some recommendations about citizen science for the Puget Sound Partnership. I guess I should back up and tell you, how do I know anything about citizen science? I was the program director for COAST, the Coastal Observation and Seabird Survey team based out of the School of Aquatic and Fisheries Sciences at the UW for many years prior to coming to Sea Grant. So that's where I got my start in the world of citizen science. So recommendations for the partnership around some of the best practices and the ways in which citizen science can really be connected to research, monitoring, and management in the Puget Sound region specifically, but it's really applicable anywhere. And then a lot of what I've done is work with individual groups, so work with scientists or work with managers or work with volunteer groups to sort of try to help make these connections between the world of citizen science and volunteer programs and the research and monitoring and management. So this picture is a picture of the Port Susan Marine Stewardship Area. The Marine Stewardship Area in Port Susan was recently established by Snohomish and Island counties, and I worked with that group to develop a citizen science program on shoreline monitoring that went along with that. This is a picture of somebody in the rainy, dark weather chipping mussels off rocks for the Mussel Watch program. So I worked with WDFW and some Snohomish County folks a few years ago to transition the NOAA Mussel Watch program in Washington State to become a volunteer-based program. So that's an example of working with scientists and others to sort of translate what was a protocol done by a NOAA contractor to a protocol that could be done by volunteers. So reminding people of things like, okay, well that's great, so you want them to take the temperature of the water, at what depth in the water, where in the water do you want them to hold the thermometer, and for how long, and reminding people about how to really operationalize your science and your protocols for a volunteer audience. And then finally, the Green Crab Project, which Jeff might tell you about. Jeff, this tells me you're next. Which is a new project that we're just starting on with some funding from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife to create a volunteer early detection program for European green crabs in Puget Sound. So that's some examples of some of the projects that I've worked with and the ways in which I work with groups. So certainly I would be happy to talk to any of you who are interested in developing citizen science components to your research projects, or certainly can connect you with volunteer groups and others who may be interested in the work that you're doing. I also serve as the citizen science representative and the vice chair of the Puget Sound Ecosystem Monitoring Program, and so I'm happy to make connections through that and other things as applicable. So we'd love to have the opportunity to chat with any of you. Thank you. Okay, Jeff. You're up.
All right, thanks. And since Ian got to put a picture of himself in, I put myself in here as well. So I've been at the university fast approaching half my life, affiliated in one way or another as an undergraduate or graduate student. Now I've been with Sea Grant here for the last 8 years. And a lot of the activities I've done have evolved over the time I've been here. And actually, I'll say that, like Ian, who has the excuse of not being here, I do not have cards or a name tag. So my email is there, as well as my mobile number, which is often a great way to contact me. So feel free to jot that down. And I believe you have the email already, so feel free to contact me that way. You can follow some of the things I do at Sailor Sea Life or my slightly out-of-date blog. So a lot of the activities that I've developed over time have really involved working with interested members of the public in a wide variety of activities. So I co-coordinate a program called the Watershed Stewardship Program in Kitsap County with my WSU colleague there. Generally, she does more of the volunteer management side, I do more of the technical side. But we have a large cadre of interested volunteers who work on restoration projects, monitoring projects, and outreach projects. As part of this, we've also kind of gotten a feel for other programs who also work with similar groups of people throughout the region, helping establish the South Sound Estuary, South Sound Estuary Association. Thank you, South Sound Estuary Association. Several years ago, they developed a beach naturalist program, and we helped establish that, just as others like the Seattle Aquarium helped us establish our beach naturalist program. And we've also worked with those at Island County and Jefferson County who have similar programs. So again, kind of that theme of the types of people I work with are highly engaged citizens, many of whom are like us, they're just retired, or like us, they're just home with kids for a while in one other outlet. So they're actually generally a highly educated group. A lot of them have particular interests, a lot of shoreline homeowners, that kind of thing. So, so anyway, that's an audience that as you're thinking about who to reach out to, that I might be able to help with. And as Kate said, we work together on some of the citizen science elements, again, engaging these folks in different activities. So again, there's quite a few things listed up there that are the general areas I work in. You'll probably have a chance to read them. So, an area of specialty that I tend to focus on is aquatic invasive species. So if that's of interest at all to you from one angle or another, feel free to get in touch with me and talk about those. The green crab is a new project that is going to be a large component of that, as well as a group of teachers who are interested in using invasive species curriculum with their students. And that is really it. So the way that I can help you, you know, again, reaching out to these audiences, if you have citizen science elements, Kate's an excellent resource. I might be a good resource out in the field with some of those communities who might have available volunteers. And also, for me, it's very valuable to have you here and actually be starting this process of communication, because for all these highly educated and interested people that we work with, they are always itching for science to be fed back to them. So this is a wonderful piece of that process. And any opportunity to exchange things with folks like me that are even if it's not part of your outreach plan, it's a great way to get the word out, because those people can continue to spread it. Ricky?
I'm Bridget Trusin. I'm a coastal policy specialist. And basically I have a background in biology and then also graduated with my master's degree in the School of Marine Affairs here at the UW. And my focus in my thesis was really looking at how communities can be involved in decision-making around coastal management. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about how to engage those communities and get their buy-in managing their resources. So right now I'm focused on working on the state's marine spatial planning process. I first began working on Washington State's marine spatial planning process as a Hirschman Fellow, working at the Department of Ecology, and then came over to Washington Sea Grant, and since then I've been working on the state's outreach engagement plan, as well as coordinating the science advisory panel. Most of the scientists that are on the Science Advisory Panel are from UW. They're also federal scientists and also state scientists. So some of my areas of interest outside of marine spatial planning are, like I said, community engagement, resilience building, resilience-led decision making, creating outreach plans. So if that's an area that you would like some feedback on, very familiar with how to develop a large-scale outreach plan and tailoring the information that you have to a specific audience. So also have connections out on the coast with stakeholders, local governments, state agencies that are working in the area, and also different scientists that have had projects out there as well. So that's it. You're up.
My name is Pete Granger. My background is in the commercial fishing industry and seafood marketing industry, and I used to be a lobbyist for a number of fishing and processing groups, and also the salmon farmers. So I know a fair amount about salmon farming, and have still some good contacts with that group if there's any need in research to make contact with them. I think my contact information will be on the sheet there, and I also have cards. So I was, up until this summer, a full-time employee of Washington Sea Grant in Seattle. I was a program leader for the outreach program, and have retired, semi-retired. I'm working 2 days a week out in Bellingham, which is home territory for me. So So I'm not available as much as I used to be, but very easy to get a hold of. Let me tell you just about 3 specific programs I'm still involved with. We do some retail seafood training with the apprenticeship program, Meat Cutters Apprenticeship Program at South Seattle Community College. We discovered a few years ago that program, which is a 2-year program, night school for these kids, they didn't have any seafood in their meat curriculum, and yet they were working behind seafood counters and selling both seafood and meat. So with Steve Arbell, one of our other outreach people, we teach a 12-hour curriculum on seafood handling, processing, quality control, sanitation, those kinds of things. I've been working in the last few years too with tribes. A lot of the tribal fisheries, especially their skiff fisheries in the rivers, are pretty antiquated, and they don't handle their catch very well. They don't have ice, they don't bleed the fish, they don't do a lot of things that would get more value for that catch. So we've been working with the tribal folks one-on-one and in groups to do that, and that would be another thing potentially I could bring, as well as one of our other folks, Sarah Piskin, is contact with tribes, especially I've done a lot of work with the Lummi Nation and with the Nisqually tribe, so I have good contacts, and Sarah does with tribes on the coast and on the straits as well. So if there's anything where you want to locate or identify somebody with the tribes in the Natural Resource Department or whatever, we have some contacts there. On the right illustrates a conference we put on every year for fishermen who want to sell direct to the public or to restaurants and bypass the processing and distribution chain. We put on what we call a Wild Seafood Exchange with Fisherman's News Magazine every year, and covers subjects for fishermen who are either involved in that and want to enhance that effort, or are looking to get into that. And more you're seeing that, and more you're seeing things about folks wanting to buy locally their fish as well as their farm produce, and we're getting involved in that whole area. So I'm up in Whatcom County now, in Bellingham, so all things Whatcom County potentially, if there's any kind of contacts or any kind of data collection or experimentation you want to do on the water or on the shoreline in Whatcom County, I can certainly put you in touch with all sorts of resources up there. I'm involved with the Marine Resources Committee now as a board member in Whatcom County, and they do a lot of hands-on research up there as well. In addition to my 2 days a week with Sea Grant, I continue to do commercial fishing over at Lummi Island in a very obscure fishery called the reef net fishery. Some of you may have heard of it. And we primarily catch Fraser River sockeye and pink salmon, but if there's any kind of interest to you, maybe as a data collection platform, we're anchored on the west side of Lummi Island, right at the head of Rosario Strait, and it would be very simple for someone to come out on a year and take samples of water, take samples of fish, whatever we might do that way. I also, the direct marketing work and my background in fishing and processing, if you've got contacts you want to make with processing companies, either here or who operate in Alaska, I have contacts that way as well. Or if you want a fishing platform, a gill net or a purse seiner to go out and collect samples, do experimentation, I can put you in touch with fishing platform. I mentioned the salmon farmers, so other than that,
You can see the digit on your phone number.
yeah, it should be 3995. At the bottom, yeah, 223-3995.
Observe first. It's a trick. And we have these little handouts that have everybody's phone number and emails on them too. So if you miss somebody's information, we've tried to put it all in one place.
Yeah, he got his phone back when we only had that many digits. So I'm Brian Kirk. I'm the Associate Director here at Washington Sea Grant. I'm confident that I have the least distinguished academic career of anyone in the room. I went to a merchant marine trade school, and then I ran around the world on ships with the Navy for 20 years. Eventually, my wife and kids said I had to stop doing that. So I came ashore, and Washington Sea Grant was kind enough to take me in. So I don't actually do outreach or science or education or engagement. What Penny lets me do is help out with the care and feeding of the staff and some kind of inside the lifeline programmatic work. The good news for you is I'm up here to talk about two very smart and hardworking people, actually three, that couldn't be here because they're out in the field right now doing the things that I'm going to show you on the slides. All right, so commercial fishing. So Sarah Fiskin and Steve Harbell, they're up at Nia Bay right now doing some of this work. Over the past 20 years, they've built up a program of safety training for commercial fishermen. So they are certified to give Coast Guard approved courses to commercial fishermen. The fishermen have to have at least one person on board the vessel who has been through one of these courses. And they do safety training, everything from man overboard to making them get into survival suits, how to use the radio, how to survive hypothermia, all that kind of stuff. And again, they've built that program up over 20 years. And they know between the two of them, everybody in the commercial fishing fleet from Oregon and California up to Bristol Bay. So they've been doing that for a while, and it's a great program. Sarah also does some technology training workshops. So this is everything from how to wire your boat or how to fix an electrical problem if you're a couple of 100 miles off the coast and something goes wrong with the electricity. Corrosion prevention, which is a huge issue for the commercial fishermen. And we're looking for ways to make them more efficient and keep them in operation so that they can fix a problem themselves when they need to. So she's been doing those workshops. I've got a couple of stats up there. I wasn't smart enough to put pictures on this, but I'll do that next time. The good news is I got the words on the screen coming up. But some of the accomplishments from their safety training, there's been at least 3 people who have pointed back to these courses and said that they're alive today because of the training they received from Steve and Sarah and a couple of other folks. Down in the Columbia River gillnet fishery, if you know anything about the Columbia River, that's prime time down there, that's the big leagues. Over the past 3 seasons, there's been 0 fatalities in the Columbia River gillnet fishery. Prior to that, they were averaging 5 fatalities in the tribal fishery a year. And again, they point back to the training that they get from Washington Sea Grant is contributing to that impressive safety record. Some of the other things that Steve and Sarah do. So for a few years now, Steve has been doing a collaborative agreement process between towboat operators and crab fishermen. And so they get together, they talk about where they can put crab pots and where towboats can tow barges off the coast. They do it in a conference room instead of out there on the water, which works out better for everybody. It's a nice example of a successful planning process. And more towards the research side, they've been involved in projects like something that's currently going on with NIOSH, where they're connecting researchers with commercial fishermen to take a look at injury rates, what's causing injury, and how they can look at addressing some of those causes. All right, so that's the commercial fishing side. Recreational boating, and I'll talk faster. So Aaron Barnett is our primary recreational boating outreach, and Sarah Fiskin does some of it as well. Aaron is primarily involved in 2 areas, the Clean Vessel Act, which deals with boater sewage. So it's the idea of you don't want it to go in the water, so you have to have a place for it to go. Aaron has given out over 7,000 adapter kits to boaters that thread right into a deck fitting. You can make a good positive connection with a suction hose on the shore, and you can pump into a holding tank off the boat instead of discharging into the water. Great program, and it's statewide. It's on freshwater as well as marine. The other thing that Aaron does is oil spill prevention outreach. So we partner with a group called POSPET. They're all in the Pacific States and British Columbia. And he gives out spill pads. He works with the boaters. He worked this past summer with Seafair. So he does a lot of stuff around oil spill and general pollution prevention. He's also a certification inspection for a program called Clean Marina. So they've got 66 marinas in the state now that are certified as clean marinas. It's a differentiator for them, for boaters to come to that marina, and they use best management practices to reduce pollution across the marina. And again, the marine technology workshops that Sarah puts on, they attract some recreational boaters as well as commercial fishermen. Okay, so all that stuff, what can they do for you? So I don't want to speak for their time, but I can tell you, if you want to know anything about commercial fishing or need to get connected with a commercial fisherman on the Pacific Coast, Sarah can definitely point you in the right direction. So if your research interests are along commercial fishing lines, she would be a phenomenal person to talk to. Likewise, for anything that has to do with boats, marinas, boat operation, Aaron Barnett speaks all that. I spent a couple of days with him at the Seattle Boat Show, watching him interact with all the boaters, and I can tell you he is top to bottom versed in all the issues that come with the recreational boating. All right, so that is my pitch on their behalf, and next up is Nicole.
Thank you. Okay, so the definition of outreach is the process of bringing information to people. So that's what I'm going to talk about, which is what I do. And my background is very different. It's in planning and law, and I work as, first I came as a consultant where I worked in the marine environment and shoreline environment, and then came to Sea Grant. So I've been with Sea Grant now about 3 years. I have a master's in urban planning and a law degree. And I'm going to talk about 3 areas. I'm going to talk about shoreline and coastal management. I'm going to talk about working waterfronts, and I'm going to talk about coastal resiliency and planning, and then talk about how education and outreach that I do is part of each of those areas. So if those are areas of interest to you, I'm your woman. All right. So coastal management, what is coastal management? Let's think about it as it includes addressing the wide range of regulatory policy and land use issues that are related to issues associated with that area of the near shore and also associated uplands into the 200-foot swath. That's Washington State's area of that. And that's where I resonate and do a lot of my work in shoreline and coastal management. So in education ways, I'm working in the College of the Built Environment, working with classes there and teaching with some of the courses there. I'm also College of the Environment, where we're taking projects and project specific and working with core groups of students and then implementing them almost like consultants on behalf of somebody who might have a very interesting project and they want to take it another step. And then in terms of outreach, the kinds of things that we're doing there is extensive work with the soft shore, so going from that hard shoreline to the soft. And in particular, one thing I'm working on is a program called Green Shores for Homes, where we're working with shoreline homeowners to encourage them to remove hard armoring. So if that's an area that you're interested in, we'd love to collaborate with you. And we're taking a lot of the work and research that, for example, Jeff and the folks at SAPS have been working on, and we're implementing that. So that's part of the soft shore work that we're doing. We also coordinated a group called the Shoreline and Coastal Planners. Again, pushing information out. We work with planners and people in ecology, the consultants. We take the information that you're producing and try to turn it into a way that's understandable and manageable for those managers and the people who are using it, particularly in the regulatory environment. So working waterfronts, what's that? Working waterfronts and water is waterfront lands, infrastructure, waterways that are used for water-dependent activities such as ports, recreational boats and harbors, fishing docks, hundreds of other places across the country where people are using access to the water. So I'm working in that field in a number of different ways, both nationally and locally. So on the national level, I'm working as part of the National Working Waterfront Network, and quarterly I find out what's going on around the United States and send out a newsletter to over almost 2,000 people. And also then we put on a symposium every 2 years. It was in Tacoma two years ago. The next one's going to be in Tampa, Florida. If you're interested in the issues of working waterfronts and you want to get that information out to the user groups, this is an excellent opportunity to do so. And at the local level, I've been working with community groups throughout the state who are developing working waterfront networks and the types of issues that Penny talked about, the workforce development, the land use issues associated with working waterfronts. Coastal resiliency, that's the final area that I work in. Audience being both the planners and then the built environment people. I've been teaching classes on with the National Disaster Training Program, on coastal flooding and risk reduction, and also been teaching courses with the coastal training program for the coastal planners, and support various group classes that have been at both the College of Built Environment in land use and planning and landscape architecture. And also as part of the outreach groups, our coastal training program has been doing a number of teaching classes, working with the Planning Association on developing best management practices for local governments, and working with various communities on their actual adaptation piece of sea level rise. And with that, I'm turning over to Harry. I also need to leave in about 5 minutes, so once we're done, I'll have cards, so I may not be able to stay.
Try not to make too much noise. I'm Terry King, and I happen to be a water quality specialist with Washington Sea Grant. I started with Washington Sea Grant in 1983. And I took a year off, and I worked for Alaska Sea Grant doing carrying capacity work. And then I came back to Sea Grant full-time in 1990. Actually 1989, working with a variety of our folks. So you can see here, I've been around for a while, and I work with a fabulous person named Jennifer Runyon, who just started about 2 years ago working with Sea Grant and got her official position last June, and she's an aquaculture outreach specialist. And we like to have fun. We've been around for a long time, house down in South Sound and Hood Canal, cover pretty much the entire state. One of our claims to fame is septic system education, and we go all around the state doing that, and that's represented in that top slide, which is a riser cover Tootsie Rolls. We offer lemonade Tootsie Rolls at these workshops, and then provide M&Ms at the end. We do a lot of work, as Miley said, a lot of us do. And we have an event called Kids Day at Oyster Fest, and we have the 4th grade students from the South Sound area come through an event and learn about different watershed principles. And then here on the right, we do a little bit of work with toxics and the household cleaners, etc. This happens to be a church group who is making these kits up for the food banks so that people would no longer use some of the toxic chemicals that were available in the stores. I'm also the aquaculture coordinator, and we do a lot of fun things with people. On the far left, there's our fancy-dancy site where we collect oysters or clams for pathogen and viral type testing. And we do that through the summer. That's been going on since 1987. Up at the top, you can see two of our staff that were really having fun, counting very small clams. So we do a lot of beach assessments for homeowners and for also with the industry. In the center is a new picture of Jennifer with her back to us and Justin. And we coordinate this sound toxin program, which is looking at harmful algal blooms throughout Puget Sound and running that alert system and trying those things. And then on the far right, we've been known to pull together an aquaculture pavilion at different fairs and festivals and make prime oysters, get these large awards, not only for the public to understand the role of aquaculture in our community, but also for the community to really value what these guys are doing. We spend a lot of time on farms. Here's a beautiful morning shot, but we have been known to go out at 2 in the morning. Down below is some on-farm research. We've been working with some of the smaller producers with some problems that they've been having on farms. So they'll give us a call a lot of times if they see disease or if they have an early kill or just something weird is going on. So we can use that as a conduit. If some of you have certain things that you're looking for, unexplained death in July, etc., we can probably get you to some of those folks, and they would love the extra help. Because right now they're getting us, and we often call people up, just randomly on campus saying, what is this and why is it happening? So that's a lot of fun. We're also working to train the new workforce. This little girl up in the corner is 3 years old. This is her second time planting clams. She's helped to plant over 2 million at this site. She was too young the very first year, but it was fun. And then we're spending a lot of time, it looks like, on emerging species. Some of these are species that the industry members and the public are interested in seeing more of. Some of these species are naturally starting to occur on some of these farms. So some of the culture techniques we're using for clams and oysters or buoy ducks, perhaps, are causing a rise in some of these native species. And so trying to figure that out also. So one of the things when I started, I showed you a picture of M&Ms, and we use that in a septic system class after 3 hours of listening to me go on and on and on about technology. And we hand everybody a package of M&Ms because this represents maintenance and monitoring. And every time they see M&Ms, they think of us, and they remember their system and how important it is to the environment. Well, last week we had quite a few classes, and I used all of the M&Ms that we had. So instead, I'm going to send you hugs and kisses and know that if you're interested in working with us, we're very nice. And we do know how, we do hold a great meeting, and we do know how to use chocolate effectively for facilitation. So I'll let you guys pass these around.
Bribery.
Bribery, exactly. And Melissa Poe is up next. Perfect, our social science.
I'm glad that Terry's handing out candy right now because we've been in here a while, it's kind of warm and everyone's probably ready to move around and do whatever this mixing thing is. So I'm Melissa Poe and I'm the social science specialist at Washington Sea Grant. A little bit about me, I have a background in sociology and Spanish and anthropology, and particularly environmental anthropology, with a focus on human dimensions of ecosystems, both in coastal marine settings as well as terrestrial upland settings. All of my social science research has been focused on food systems, tenure, decision-making, and governance, with a key interest in the kinds of cultural connections across those spheres. That translates into a lot of the work I do at Washington Sea Grant. My job title, as we started out, was social science specialist. I'm also a liaison with NOAA's Northwest Fisheries Science Center, and I work in the conservation biology division there with other integrated social and ecological systems scientists. So some of the areas where I do work are listed up here. Cultural dimensions of coastal change and management, including thinking about how to integrate cultural measures and values in ecosystem-based fisheries management. I'm also keenly interested in food systems and the ways in which food are holistically tied to dimensions of cultural and ecological well-being. This then ties into various activities around subsistence and wild harvesting and the role of harvesting in livelihoods, as well as local ecological knowledge, which is tied into many of these similar themes. How local ecological knowledge is part of social and community cohesion, people's ongoing practices with harvesting activities. And then I've been focusing on how different types of ecological change, such as climate change and more particularly ocean acidification, impacts these different types of cultural connections to ecosystems. This includes work with indigenous communities in Washington State as well as in British Columbia and other locations. And then shifting a little bit, I work with social indicators and marine spatial planning. Some of this then is looking at how different types of social well-being could be measured, particularly with a focus on coastal uses as well as coastal values. And then using some of these tools for helping and supporting decision-making in marine contexts. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the different kinds of projects I have going on, but I've listed a handful here. Just to show you the type of research and engagement that I'm involved in. And I will point out a couple of just particular topics here. I've been working with some of my colleagues, both Bridget, who was up earlier with marine spatial planning and thinking about integrated ecosystem assessments for planning. So this is a collaboration with other ecologists, and we're thinking about how to blend social and human dimensions in that work. Things that I might be able to offer you if you have a certain element of social science or interest in integrating social and ecological approaches. I could help think about what participatory and qualitative social science methods you might bring into your projects, ways to think about complementing mixed cultural and ecological methods, protocols for working with tribal communities, also potentially partner with you in developing your research interests if they are close aligned with the kind of work I do, and then also think about connecting you with other researchers who are in a broad field of social science. I'm a member of social science communities of practice in Puget Sound, in Washington State, and nationally, so I can help link you to other experts and specialists in this field, And I'm also happy to help you connect with any of the Northwest Fisheries Science Center scientists in your topic areas, particularly those who are in the Conservation and Biology Division. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Mary Ann Wagner. I am the Assistant Director of Communications for Washington Sea Grant. And I believe I may be the last one, if that's correct, so that's something to look forward to. Washington Sea Grant Communications keeps the public informed about your funded research projects, and we actively promote those projects. We staff at there we go. Okay, here we are. The staff in communications at Washington Sea Grant consists of myself, Marcus Duke, who is the editor, and he's in the back of the room there, and Robin Ricks, graphic designer, and Eric Scipiano, who is our science writer. And he's not here today, but he would most likely be the one contacting investigators to write about articles and promote them throughout the state and nationally. And also, Eric and I will be working with researchers on and reporting. So one of the main tools that we use in our toolkit at Washington Sea Grant is the newsletter, the Sea Star newsletter, that has samples here, and they're also in the back of the room. And this is the piece that goes out to our primary audiences, and it's quarterly. And take a couple of those if you haven't already, and get a sense of the style and direction that our articles take. And also we have a lot of other tools. We have social media, Facebook, Twitter, and increasingly we'll be posting more actively on YouTube and using Instagram out in the field. So that's coming up soon, and we're always asking people to contribute to those. As researchers, that's a big piece of what you can be doing. Also, press releases. So these are actually very good tools for getting articles out into publications locally and nationally. Also the website. We are in the process of redesigning the Washington Sea Grant website currently, and as you can see there, that's the homepage, rough draft on the left, and on the right is the research page example. And you as a researcher would possibly be featured on the homepage with your work as it's in progress. Also, you'd be featured in a full page in the research section of the website. So let's see how we can support you. We write feature articles and updates and photos on Facebook, as I mentioned, feature projects on the website, as I mentioned, write and disseminate press releases, and we handle media relations for you and provide media training as needed. One example of something that came up last week was we got a call from KOW wanting to do a story on gooey duck farming, and ended up with a feature article this past week working with Sean McDonald. We also assist you in preparing materials for professional papers. We do a lot of work in that area as needed, and providing you support for publicizing conferences, workshops, and videotaping of your work, whatever is needed. But we do ask that you give us 6 to 4 weeks advance when you do think you might have a communications need, just to give us enough time for putting it on our schedule and for planning as needed and do a thorough job. So I would be happy to answer questions anytime through this process for you, or you can give any of us a call. Again, Mary Ann at Washington Sea Grant. Thank you.
Please give everyone
somebody said, I had no idea you had this many new people that I don't know. This is a person who's worked for us for almost 15 years. So hopefully in all of the folks that you've heard a little bit from today, you found somebody that you would be interested in working with. Again, we've done this, we've been really motivated by the request for proposals, but you don't have to feel confined, and if you're welcome to talk to any of our outreach staff at any particular point in time. What we're going to do now, I'm going to ask Chelsea to come up and to talk to you about the next step in the process. What I want to do, one of the things since this is kind of a new thing for us, she will be contacting you after it's over.
and asking for you to give us comments and suggestions, whether this was useful, what wasn't useful. So you can feel free and you can be anonymous if you want, but it won't. We really could use the help and whether this was a good idea or not. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and bring up Chelsea. I think that was probably everything that we had to cover. Okay, so how long do we have?
Well, I don't even know what time it is.
I think we have it over
It's
an hour.
2:30.
2:30.
Okay.
An hour and a half. So a few housekeeping things. If you haven't yet signed in, it'd be wonderful if you did so we can keep track who came and also send you the survey at the end. I'd also like to mention that while we have a lot of staff members here, not everyone is present. So if you did want to see who else works with us, you can look at this page here and all the contact information is updated and also on our website. We are also have been recording this video, so if you're really jazzed about it and would like to watch it again, great. As Marianne mentioned, we're beefing up our YouTube, so push this video there. But more importantly, if you'd like to share it with others who weren't able to attend, we'd love it if you could send that along to them so they can get an idea of what Sea Grant does and how they can sort of plug into us.
We'll post it.
Yeah, and we can post the PowerPoint as well. And so lastly, the logistics for this second part, which hopefully you're all really excited about, is we're going to clear off these 6 tables in the back, and we're going to have 2 staff members sitting at each, and we'll hopefully do a little bit of cycling around. You can talk to the people who you're most interested in. Because we have an hour and a half, that is a decent amount of time to talk to people, but hopefully everyone will be respectful of their time and notice when there are other people who might want to talk. I may have to do some facilitating up here and ask people to shuffle around, but just listen for me and otherwise just be mindful of others. And that's probably about it. And so look for the survey I send after this meeting is over and hopefully get to talk to everybody you need to. So if Sea Grant staff can go find their nameplates that are on these tables here, we can sort of turn the chairs around. And if you need more chairs, we're allowed to move any furniture in here, so feel free to do so.